Good evening, my friends, good afternoon, and perhaps good night, depending on where you're watching this from. Once again, we have another formative video. This one will be about the drow. So go ahead, pack your bowl, hit that vape, and light that cigarette if you have to. We're going to try to make this short like we did our last video. In order to help us along with this, I have drawn up these whiteboards, so that way I am not having to look over your head at a computer screen. As you can see here, these basically given down a breakdown of the rule of the culture and everything of the drow. So let's go ahead and start. So the very beginning myth that we have about the drow is that really we have to first talk about the elves. Now, as many of you may not know, in mythology, the elves were born out of the battle between Corleon and Grimish. From Corleon's blood, the elves grew. So, with that being said, that tells you that all elves are a byproduct of Corleon. So, when we go and take a look at what has happened into developing the drow, there is something that is called the Crown Wars. During the Crown Wars, basically, it doesn't really go into detail, but it is a fight between the elves amongst themselves, apparently about which city would be rulers or which sub-race of elves would rule. It doesn't really go into details, unfortunately. But what is stated is that during this time that the Cyril Tel Quisan, which is what the drow were originally called, they worshipped Celadrine, which it doesn't really go into details about this god, but I believe that this may have simply just been an oversight, and they may be talking about Sahina, which is Corion's consort. She, in some legends, depending on which ones you could find, it is listed as she aided Corion Landerther in his fight with Grimish by the use of the moon and its light. So, from there, during the Crown Wars, the Cyril Tel Quisan, which become the drow, started worshipping darker and darker deities, Jubilex, and then finally Loth. Now, in the Monsters and Mythology book, it lists Loth as being a tannery. So what that means is that she is actually counted as being both a god and a demon. Now, demons all dwell in the abyss and come from the abyss. The abyss generally generates more and more and more and more demons, as to where devils have to go through a petitioning process to become into being a devil and different ranks of being in the 9 hells. So, first thing that should be noted is, with Loth being an intermediate goddess, or intermediate god, kind of throws a lot of things off there. So, as I discussed, that a tannery, and according to one of the source books that I used, which was the listing of like the races of hell, the races of the abyss, different demons and stuff, that it said a tannery is more likely to rip a poor sod's head off. So, kind of gives you an idea of what a demon is about. They're about chaos, destruction. There's no real oversight with a lot of demons. But however, with Loth, she has laid in some very specific goals. The rulership of all the realms of the Underdark, that weaker races can be eliminated, stronger ones can wait until the drow are stronger. The extermination of the surface race, which is a purely symbolic thing because, with a lot of people that know, drow magic stops working out of the Underdark. It's something having to do with the sunlight. So, with this being said, it's kind of lays into, okay, is she a god or is she a demon? Well, she is actually both. And, when I come over to here to my big whiteboard, we'll go ahead and discuss that. So, we've already discussed her goals, as well as the way that Loth has set up her structure. Now, of course, anybody that is familiar with drow or read any of R.A. Salvatore's books with Drizzle Do'Urden basically already know this. But for those of you that don't, we'll go ahead and just discuss that a little bit more. So, in drow society, females lead. They're police, executioners, clerics. They fill multiple roles. Now, however, females inside drow society are not safe because Loth wants the drow to be stronger and to build their power base. In order to do this, every so often, the drow have to fight amongst each other. Now, unlike other evil races where, their god would let them have a long, drawn-out war of attrition, and sooner or later somebody breaks ranks and conquers. With Loth, she says that if you are going to commit a deed, that it has to be a decisive strike, which means that you have to erase all traces of what you have done. So, if you kill one member of a house, you have to kill the entire house, the entire family of drow. So that way there are no survivors. And it also ensures that the attacker has to be strong enough to overcome their intended foe. Now, it sounds a little weird, but it's something that where she's not wanting the number of drow to basically disappear. She wants there to continuously seem to be a baseline number of drow that worship her and that she can manipulate to her ends in this war against Corian Landerther and the surface elves, So, just as she rules through fear and intimidation, so does her priestess. So, you have to give me a second here. So, basically what I'm getting at is that struggle and strife are the tools that she uses to kind of sharpen the drow into a blade that she can aim at any of her enemies. Now, Loth is not alone in her dominion over the drow. She has some lesser gods that also play a part into it. Now, with Loth, just as I've explained, that the females are clerics, and they serve the police, executioner, judge, multiple roles. And it's always the female drow that's at top. And the male drow is below because females, Loth is female, so it kind of goes hand in hand. Now, when it comes to Loth, she basically has her avatars come out of hiding or be present at things like yearly or seasonal rituals and sacrifices, the rituals that turn drow into drider, and it even goes a little bit more into the drider and the spider concept with her. See, a lot of her clerics use what's known as arachnomancy, and it's basically like the same thing as onomancy and some of the cultures that practice divination in our world. So, if a group of Loth's priestess were trying to figure out exactly what this coming year would need of them, they would study the movements of a spider, or perhaps they would capture a drider that had caught their attention because of certain actions or behaviors, and they would go as far as to cut this drider open while it's still alive and watch its behavior and then read its entrails. So, even when Loth punishes a member of her chosen people, she still has a purpose for them, albeit sometimes as cannon fodder or to be served as like into this arachnomancy, which I just mentioned. The drow consider themselves superior, and when they form trading partnerships with any race, if they are stronger than that race, they will go ahead and just wipe them out or completely enslave a city. So if a group of, let's say let's say a mind flayer, small mind flayer kingdom is quite near enough to be a trading post, but there are not enough mind flayers compared to the number of the drow. They will go ahead and take advantage of that, and using their massive slave armies basically attack the Ithalids, or aka mind flayers, outpost, and it will be a slave battle, and it will be overseen by drow, and it will be overseen by the mind flayers at different points using their traditional strategies. Mind flayers will use levitate and psionic powers. The drow will use their version of levitate, globes of darkness, and a lot of the other traditional spells that you may have encountered in adventures featuring drow. Sorry, we have a lot of activity going on behind the boards and stuff, and I don't want them to get knocked over. So, with that being discussed, let's go ahead and let me move into Loth and her pantheon. So with Loth being at the top, she has a male consort known as Selvitaran. It's a champion of Loth. He's also a god of male warriors. Then beneath them, there's Vanarum, also called the masked god. He is the patron god of males and is in opposition to Loth. He's also in charge of thieves. His aims and interest is in the surface world and the drow who live there. He avoids Loth due to his lack of power. Now, underneath Loth, and in this weird kind of triangle of gods, there is a demigod that's known as Kiranasi, and she's of vengeance and undeath. So, she's forced to acknowledge Loth's power, not by choice, but because of Loth's power over her, because she's a demigod, and being an intermediate god, there's a whole entire ranking system of power there. So, she's in charge of undeath and vengeance. She's not like Loth, though. She wants mindless undead minions that she can be able to move around. Now, with all of this being said, this is a very complicated race that I've tried to boil down into just a few minutes video here. Without this context, the drow and the story of characters like Drizzle Du Yurden, Jaraxel, they're not forged in this environment of female supremacy where males are at the bottom, but there's a lot of politics that play into it. And the males kind of have their own circles that they move about underneath the female clerics. So that's not to say that the drow as a society are completely hopeless, because the goddess Illustrea, the Dark Maiden, hopes to redeem the drow. She's a goddess of beauty, song, sword-working, hunting, and moonlight. She's meant to kind of give a redemption to some drow who are willing to be able to take it. So, all of this in a nutshell would seem very problematic to some people who can't comprehend how an evil goddess basically rules the society and shapes the society. So, with Loth, because spiders are the motif, you see things like arachnomancy, you see buildings that are shaped like spider webs. Spiders are a predominant theme that you have in all design motifs, webs, things like that. Not only that, because she is female, of course, all of her clerics are female. And just as she dominates the clerics that worship her, they dominate the male society, and then the males usually have to deal with slaves. They dominate over the slaves. There's a contest between males as to who will breed with these priestesses of Loth. The higher up ranking priestesses would obviously get their first choice amongst choice males who have perhaps graduated from the School of Warriors with honor, maybe even going as far as to select a wizard consort, and of course, this is not a monogamous relationship. Just like a spider, a cleric of Loth can basically sit there and, if she's unhappy with a mate, she'll kill him, replace him, or if she doesn't even think that he's worthy of killing, she'll just replace him with a new consort. or she may have several consorts that she wishes to play against one another. So it's quite literally a society that is locked inside a power struggle. And this power struggle shapes characters who come out of it. Just as it shaped Jaraxel, who, he was in charge of all the rogues in Metadobrizion. And going even further, he took his career to the surface world once he fell into line with the assassin Aremus, and their whole entire interaction with Drizzle du Jurden. And of course, anybody that's interested in those stories, I really suggest that you take a look at R.A. Salvatore's books. They are a very good guide into the mindset and society. I would suggest the first 3 books, Home, I can't remember it now. I think it's Home, Sojourner, and Exile, I think, are the 3 books. They're his first 3 books with Driz. They're a wonderful series. It gives you a very complex look into the society as you read the books. Excuse me. Now, with that being said, I'll leave this video here because, as I promised you guys, that I would not talk your ears off. But in the next video, we will cover the Gnolls. It will be a much shorter video because, unfortunately, with Gnoll Society, it's not that complex. But as I'm discussed all this, I hope it gives you an idea of how these races need to stay the same throughout whatever edition of Dungeons & Dragons is printed. Personally, myself, as many of you know, I prefer the 3.0, 3.5 rules and kind of dabbling into some of the stuff that Pathfinder gave us. But that's neither here nor there. So, with it being all said and done, my friends, I wish you a good night, good morning, or good afternoon wherever you are, and I hope you continue to watch. And don't forget to subscribe to this channel if you have not subscribed already.